According to the Son of Man, the reason he spoke the gospel of the kingdom in parables to the crowds was because the message in the parables were not meant to be understood by all that heard them. However, in a private setting, Messiah would graciously explain the parables to his disciples. Previously in video 18, we found that the prophetic scriptures accurately predicted the second coming of Messiah, where the Son of Man will conquer the nations of the world and establish his kingdom on the last day of the tribulation period, which is also the first day of the millennial reign. We also found in video 19 that Messiah's ascension and triumphal return is conveyed in the scriptures as the wedding of the Lamb. We further determined from the parable of the 10 virgins that half the virgins were wise, and that at Messiah's second coming, the Lamb will be joined by only the wise virgins, which are prepared for his return. Shalom, my name is Guy Smith, and this is the 20th video in this channel as the days of Noah. In this video, we're going to begin the process of determining the message being conveyed in the parable of the 10 virgins. Jerusalem fell to the Romans in 70 AD after a 143-day siege. According to the historian Josephus, 1.1 million Jews were slain and 97,000 were taken into captivity and slavery. However dreadful, this national tragedy provides end-time believers with vital survival information. According to the prophet Zechariah, the old city of Jerusalem is predicted to be in the process of a fortress siege, where half the inhabitants will be compromised. It is at that point that Messiah will come, and on behalf of the remnant of the inhabitants of the old city, he will fight the nations which will have come against Jerusalem. Many of the 1.1 million Jews which died in 70 AD had to be aware of this prediction and probably assumed that the Roman siege on Jerusalem in 70 AD was the fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy and that they would be protected by the advent of Messiah. Unfortunately for the 1.1 million which died, Messiah did not come back then. Their misfortune, however, did not negate Zechariah's prediction that the Messiah is going to come and protect half the inhabitants of Mount Zion while the old city is deeply embattled in this predicted fortress siege. So what is the implication? Zechariah's prediction is the written explanation of the parable of the 10 virgins. Notice that both the parable and Zechariah's prediction have 3 things in common. First, both passages are describing the second coming of Messiah. In the parable of the 10 virgins, the Son of Man's return is compared to the arrival of the bridegroom. In Zechariah's prediction, Messiah arrives fighting the nations and setting foot on the Mount of Olives, which is east of Jerusalem. Secondly, both accounts provide details concerning a group of believers which will be alive at the second coming. One of the events of the second coming is the first resurrection, where the believers which have died in their faith are bodily resurrected and will rule with the Son of Man for 1,000 years. However, the scriptures do make mention of believers which will be counted worthy to escape the predicted apocalypse and be alive at Messiah's return. And it is this parable of the 10 virgins which is providing us with details that is describing these worthy end-time believers, which will be alive and will be waiting to meet Messiah the bridegroom at the time of his return. Likewise, Zechariah's prediction contains survival instructions meant for those of you which will be found remaining inside Jerusalem at the time of Messiah's return. Thirdly, both the parable and the Old Testament prophecy predict that only half the participants will enter the kingdom. According to the parable, half of the 10 virgins are prepared. And as circumstances would have it, only the half that are prepared will join Messiah the bridegroom and enter the kingdom. Likewise, Zechariah's account of the siege against Jerusalem is a description where half those in the city will be taken captive. And it is these individuals which go into captivity that are represented by the 5 unwise virgins in the parable. Then, after half the city is taken, Messiah will enter the battle on behalf of the remnant still within the city. And it is these remaining individuals which the Son of Man fights for that are those worthy end-time believers which will be alive at the second coming and are represented by the 5 wise virgins. So, when Messiah does return, he's going to set foot on the Mount of Olives, which will create an earthquake that will split the mountain in half. This quake will run east and west and will reach all the way to Jerusalem from the east, and will be instrumental in protecting those of you not cut off by dividing the old city of Jerusalem in half, creating a north and a south side. And at the time this earthquake does divide Jerusalem, it will be the instrument for separating the unwise virgins from the wise, because the circumstances will encourage the wise virgins on one side and protected, while the unwise virgins will gravitate to the other side and into captivity. Which raises the question, which side of the earthquake should you, the wise virgins, be on? According to the psalmist, it's the north side. This is part of being prepared and meant only for you, the wise virgins, because the unwise virgins will never understand. So in review, Zechariah's prediction concerning the future siege on Jerusalem is the written explanation of the parable of the 10 virgins, where within the walls of the old city will be the individuals the parable recognizes as the 5 wise virgins and the 5 unwise virgins. As the siege progresses, the city will be taken, where half the inhabitants recognized as the unwise virgins will go into captivity. At that point, Messiah will return with the resurrected believers to fight the nations which will be sieging Jerusalem. Then the Son of Man will set foot on the Mount of Olives, which will create an earthquake that will split the old city in half and be instrumental in protecting you, the wise virgins, which will be on the north side of the earthquake. This is the gospel of the kingdom according to Messiah's parable of the 10 virgins. This video and more can be found on thewhitestonechronicle.com.